Hello, friends. Stay with me because now we're diving into the very heart of battle, into that moment when the clang of tracks mixed with the roar of artillery, and the fate of a battle was decided by a single precise shot. Imagine yourself inside a steel box that smells of oil, gunpowder, and fear. You are the crew of a Soviet heavy tank, the pride of the Red Army. And there, in the crosshairs of your sight, slowly, like a deliberate and ruthless executioner, a silhouette appears. You know it, you've heard chilling stories about it. It's him, the Tiger. And now you will learn what happens when an 88mm piece of red-hot metal, fired from its barrel, meets your armor. The story I want to tell you is not a dry recitation of facts. It's a drama of metal, will, and technology. It's the story of why one tank could rip the turret off another like the lid off a tin can, and how that brutal lesson changed everything. Don't switch away, it's going to be intense. And, by the way, be sure to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which other legendary confrontation you want me to cover in the same way. Your opinion is very important for the channel's growth. Let's be honest. When we hear the phrase German heavy tank, 99 times out of 100, one single image instantly pops into our heads. Angular, massive, with a long barrel. The PzKpfw VI, also known as the Tiger. It has long since ceased to be just a machine. It has become a myth, an archetype, a symbol. For some, it's an invincible steel monster, the epitome of power and engineering, the scourge of the battlefield. For others, it's a finicky, cumbersome, fuel and spare parts hungry king's folly that didn't justify the astronomical resources invested in it. Debates about it have raged for decades, with countless arguments on forums and in smoking rooms. But there is one fact that everyone will agree on, even the most ardent skeptics. Its appearance on the Eastern Front near Leningrad in the autumn of 1942 was a shock. It wasn't just a new tank. It was a challenge to the entire Soviet doctrine of tank design and tank warfare. And the first one to have to take that challenge on its armor was none other than the main Soviet heavyweight of that period, the KV-1S tank. To understand the full tragedy and inevitability of this encounter, we need to take a step back and figure out what this KV-1S even was. And here begins a paradox that best illustrates the complexity and cruelty of war. The fact is that the Soviet industry began preparing a response to the future threat named Tiger, even before the first Tiger fired its first shot. Sounds like science fiction, but it's harsh reality. The KV-1S, where the letter S stood for Skorostnoy, high speed, went into series production in August 1942, right in the midst of the Stalingrad meat grinder. And the first Tigers saw combat only at the end of that same year. So, who was it created to fight? The answer lies not in a clash with a specific enemy tank, but in the scathing criticism that frontline soldiers, the very men who fought and died in the first KVs, heaped upon the designers' heads. And the criticism was devastating. Yes, the first KVs, Kliment Voroshilov, which appeared during the Finnish War, were a nightmare for the Germans in 1941. Their armor, 75mm thick, couldn't be penetrated by practically anything except anti-aircraft guns and point-blank hits. But a terrible price was paid for that armor. The tank was slow, cumbersome, with an extremely unreliable transmission that failed more often than from enemy shells. The driver needed Herculean strength to control it. In short, it was more of a mobile pillbox than a tank for deep breakthroughs, which the Soviet General Staff so loved. By the summer of '42, this had become obvious to everyone. A heavy tank was needed that wouldn't lag behind the medium T-34s and could perform tasks in maneuver warfare. And so the KV-1S was born. It was created in crash mode at the legendary Chelyabinsk tractor plant, which people already called Tankograd. Two tasks were set, and they were mutually exclusive: lighten the vehicle to increase speed and reliability, and yet maintain its heavy status. The compromise, as often happens, turned out to be painful. The armor was catastrophically weakened. Whereas the early KVs had 75mm of frontal hull armor, the KV-1S used a two-plate scheme, 40mm plus another 40, but spaced slightly apart. In theory, such a scheme could offer advantages, but in practice, it often didn't. The sides and rear became thinner. The turret, however, remained cast and quite massive, but its frontal silhouette wasn't invulnerable either. On the other hand, the tank lost almost 5 tons. Its engine breathed easier, the transmission was refined, and its speed increased to 43 kilometers per hour on the highway. For a heavy tank, this was a breakthrough. The crews were initially delighted. Finally, a machine that was responsive, didn't break down at every turn, and could keep up with the general advance. That's why from August to December 42, 626 of these machines were built. A pace that boggles the mind, considering these were heavy tanks, not simple passenger cars. The KV-1S became the most mass-produced heavy tank of the Red Army at the critical juncture of 42 to 43. It fought at Stalingrad, at Kursk. It was seen on the hottest sectors of the front. And ironically, it also became the swan song of the entire KV line. Because in the pursuit of speed, it lost the main thing it was valued for: protection. In fact, in terms of armor power, it increasingly converged with the reinforced modifications of the T-34, ceasing to be a uniquely protected machine. Historians today agree. The KV-1S marked a dead end. It was a compromise tank, a temporary solution while waiting for something fundamentally new. But war doesn't wait, and now he appears on stage. The Tiger. I won't delve too deeply into its technical underpinnings. I'll just say the main thing. This wasn't evolution. It was revolution. The Germans, having encountered the Soviet T-34s and KVs in 41, realized they needed not just a good tank, but a dominator tank capable of destroying the enemy from ranges where he would be powerless. And they created it. The key to its power was the gun. A long, terrifying 88mm KW-36 gun. And here we come to the very essence of our confrontation. To understand why a shell from this gun was so deadly, we need to look even deeper into history. The German school in the field of heavy anti-tank and anti-aircraft guns had vast experience. The legendary Act 88, the 88mm Flak 36 anti-aircraft gun, was already the terror of the skies by the start of the war, but very quickly the Germans realized it was also the perfect anti-tank gun. High muzzle velocity, stunning accuracy, and ballistics. The Tiger's gun was a direct, adapted for tank mounting descendant of this anti-aircraft gun. This meant that the German designers took an already perfected, ideal gun and stuffed it into a tank. The Soviet school took a different path. Our famous tank guns, like the 76mm ZIS-5 or F-34, were often created either from scratch as purely tank guns or based on divisional or even howitzer guns. They were excellent for their tasks: destroying infantry, light fortifications, field guns. They were universal soldiers. But in a duel situation, when it was necessary to pierce thick armor from a long distance, their ballistic characteristics and armor-piercing shells were inferior to the German needles. Now let's take the dry but eloquent numbers. The shell from the KW-36 gun. At a distance of 1,000 meters, it confidently penetrated armor 135 millimeters thick. That's almost 1.5 of my fists. Friends, imagine. And now let's look at the armor of the KV-1S. Maximum thickness in the frontal projection, that very two-layer scheme. Formally 80 millimeters, but in essence, considering the slope, the equivalent could reach 100. Sides 60 millimeters. Rear also about 60. Turret rounded, cast, hard to penetrate, but the turret front was 82 millimeters thick. Do you see the dissonance? Even taking the most optimistic estimates for the KV-1S's armor, the Tiger could shoot it from a distance of 1.5 kilometers, while itself remaining practically invulnerable. For the KV-1S's 76mm gun, the Tiger's 100mm frontal armor was a tough nut to crack even from 500 meters. And from 1,000, the chances were close to 0. And now imagine that very situation I described at the beginning. You're in a KV-1S. You see a Tiger. Distance, a kilometer, maybe more. He fires first. You don't even hear the shot. You only hear the impact. If it hits the side or rear, that's it. The shell, meeting no serious resistance, bursts inside, tearing apart and incinerating everything in its path. It carries pieces of armor with it, which become deadly shrapnel. Often the ammunition would cook off. And then what was described in reports with chilling calm would happen. The turret was torn off its ring. This is not a figure of speech. The energy of an 88mm shell was enough, upon hitting the turret base or its sides, to literally rip the multi-ton steel casting off and throw it several meters away. It was a guaranteed and instantaneous death sentence for the entire crew. No chance of survival. In the memoirs of German tankers who fought on Tigers during that period, like Otto Carius, one thought echoes. Soviet tanks, including the KV, were not perceived as equal opponents in an open duel. Why? Besides the power of the gun, there was another deadly factor: rate of fire. The Tiger's crew of 5 had a clear division of duties. The commander commanded, the gunner aimed, the loader worked like a metronome. In 1 minute, a well-trained crew could make 3 to 4 aim shots. Methodically, without fuss. One tank against several. First shot. A T-34 on the left is burning. Second shot. A KV-1S in the center loses its turret. Third shot. An Su-152 trying to sneak up from the flank is knocked out. All in 2 minutes. What could the KV-1S counter this with? Desperate courage. The will to survive and win. Tactical cunning. Most often, to knock out a Tiger, it had to close to a critically short distance. 400, 300, or even 200 meters, so that its shell could penetrate the German side or rear. And that meant the need for a covert maneuver, a distraction, taking the first or even the second hit. The price of such success was monstrously high. So, was the KV-1S a failure of a machine? No. It was a machine of its time. It was that very forced compromise that held the front line, while back in the rear, in those same workshops of Tankograd, work was already in full swing on the response. The harsh, bloody lesson taught by the Tiger was learned instantly. Already by the end of 43, the one who would have his say would take to the battlefield. The heavy tank IS-2, Iosif Stalin, with its powerful sloped frontal armor of 120mm, which could already withstand a Tiger's hit from a kilometer away, and with its monstrous 122mm gun, whose high explosive shell could blow a Tiger's turret off even without penetrating the armor. The era of the KV ended, giving way to a new, even more formidable classic. Thus, the confrontation between the KV-1S and the Tiger is not just a comparison of 2 iron monsters. It's a clash of 2 philosophies, 2 industrial capacities, 2 desperate attempts to outplay each other. One, a technological predator created for dominance. The other, a heavyweight soldier, born in the fire of a crash program and necessity. Their meeting was unequal, but it became the crucible in which future victory was forged. This is a story about the price of mistakes and the price of genius, about how a deadly blow to armor gave birth to new, even stronger steel. That's all, friends. I hope I managed to immerse you in that era and show how complex and dramatic the tank duels of the Great Patriotic War were. If you liked it, if you felt the course of those events, put a like. It's the best support for the channel. Be sure to subscribe, because there are many more such breakdowns ahead. We'll talk about the clash of the Panther with the T-34-85, and about how the Ferdinands burned at Kursk. Write in the comments, which other legendary piece of equipment or battle do you want to hear a detailed story about? Your wishes are my guide to action. See you next time on air.